but I'm aware of this creeping AI thing happening. Am I disturbed by it? I don't know. Maybe you get on Instagram, there's some AI there, and often it's pictures of models, and you look and you think, oh, wow, what a great photograph. And then you look, oh, it's AI, and it's an instant disappointment.
Thank you for taking the time of meeting us and doing this interview. We're very excited to finally see you face to face as well, and not just via email. So that's going to be fun. And I want to start already with the first question. So, who is David Gibson?
Oh, God, what a question.
Yeah.
I'm a human being.
Love it. And when did this life of a human being started, and how did it started?
Well, when I was born, I mean, if the second birth would be as a photographer, maybe, which goes back, well, quite a long time. It depends when you set the start date. But
And where would you start the start date?
I think I would. I kind of got serious with photography in the late 1980s. I had a camera before that, but I got serious in 1988 when I did a 2-year photography course, and I went up several kind of levels and had a very obsessive period, a very steep learning curve, I think you would call it.
And what did you gain from this course? It was the first time you got into photography?
I think that the course probably wasn't that great, to be honest, but I think I would consider myself self-taught in many respects. And I learned more in the library at the college than sort of the actual course, because the course was very technical and it was very advertising and editorial photography. And I'm not into studio photography. I'm a very non-technical person. So my inspiration and this steep learning curve that I mentioned came from looking at photographs, and mainly Magnum photographers.
You would say that those were your most important inspirations?
Initially, yes. I mean, I can't emphasize enough this obsessive period when I kind of just discovered something and just dived into it and learned a lot and looked at lots and lots of photographic books.
Okay, so then now that we're talking about your learning curve, I already want to ask you something, and it's, you have a spanning career of 30 years, we could say, a little bit.
Yeah, more, 34.
Almost,
yeah,
almost 35 years.
It keeps going up.
And it keeps going up, exactly. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, what has changed during the years since 30 years ago when you started to become a photographer? How was your photographer vision at the time, and how it evolved during the years, and how is it now? Can you describe it a little bit?
I think just the natural process of getting older. I think when I started, I was incredibly innocent in all ways, and I didn't know much. And of course, I've continued to learn. And my initial inspirations were Henri Cartier-Bresson and Elliot Erwitt, and I was very rooted in that black and white tradition. I mean, I was absolutely religious almost about black and white photography. And after a while, I mean, gradually things changed, and maybe surprisingly, I've moved in different directions into color photography, and my photography has not stood still. It's changed a lot.
And why were you so religious with black and white when you started?
Because I didn't know anything else. Color photography to me seemed completely alien.
Alien?
Alien. I thought, who does color photography? I mean, I was very traditional, that's how I started. Black and white photography. Maybe it's because it was the days of analog and people used to go in the dark room. So my learning experience was the dark room, and that's what photography was for me, black and white photography. I think my time as a photographer straddles two periods, before the internet and after the internet, the analog world and to the digital world. And I think the internet had a huge impact on my photography.
Why so?
Well, because the internet started for most people in about the year 2000, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I did photography, street photography, in isolation mainly. And of course, once the internet kind of arrived, I became part of a community, which was, I mean, I say that with hindsight, but it was a big, big influence on me, as it was for a lot of people.
Oh.
I belonged to what would, I think, fairly be described as the first street photography collective in the internet age, which was in public. And I was one of the first photographers to join that. And that was a huge influence on my photography as well. So the two parts, if you like, the in isolation and then joining the street photography community.
Okay.
Which is
And
where I'm at now, I guess.
you're still in that second part of your life, you would say.
Oh, yeah, I think so, yeah.
More than the solo
Yeah,
type of
yeah. I
photography.
mean, lockdown probably set me back a bit, as it did a lot of people. But yeah, I'm part of the street photography community. For better or worse.
Yeah, that's cool. I wanted to ask you, what was your first camera? And if you remember, what was your first photo?
I think I had, as a kid, I had a Kodak Instamatic camera, probably. I think the first proper camera I had was a Pratica Nova camera, which I had when I was about 17.
And you started already photographing at that age?
Yes, to a certain extent, but I wasn't
Very ready.
I mean, I just took pictures when I went on holiday and stuff. I didn't really start photography seriously until I was about 30. I didn't know who Henri Cartier-Bresson was until I was about 30. So that gives you an idea of my, innocence, if you like, and not.
I mean, there's never
anything.
a good time, a right or wrong time to start photographing.
No,
So
I know things just happen when they happen. That's
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. I wanted to go back a little bit on your career, your life, and there's something that, as you know, we have a lot of we work with different photographers from different parts of the world, and every photographer says that the places where they grew up greatly influenced the way they do photography, the way they have their own vision of photography. Would you say the same? Do you think that the place where you grew up kind of influenced you in a positive or maybe also in a negative way? Do you think that's part of your approach?
I don't know. Well, I grew up on the edge of London. So London was my first subject, if you like. But I don't think London caused me to be a photographer. I think it's more the whole world of photography. It wasn't London as such.
Okay, that's interesting.
Okay, I wanted to briefly introduce myself. I am Maria Luisa. It's an honor to have you.
Right.
I wanted to follow up with what Lucrezia was saying. And when did your gaze change as a photographer? Like we observe the world because it's in our nature to observe things. But when did you exactly start observing the world as a photographer? Do you remember a particular instance that made you think, I would really like to capture this moment?
I think I've always been a curious person, that I've gone for walks and wanted to see what was round the corner, if you like. And I think photography gave me a purpose. But the thing that probably really triggered it off, maybe, was when I sort of first started to travel, and I spent quite a few years in Australia and New Zealand. And I remember traveling around New Zealand and writing in my diary at the time, you know, photography is the purpose of the trip or something. You know, I recognized that I should have a purpose and take photographs while I was traveling. But that was the first kind of stage. But it was still some years before it went up to a different level. But the traveling, you know, like people go on holiday, they take photographs. So I think that was a kind of a beginning when I first started. It wasn't just a question of just looking. There was maybe some kind of need to record, you know, like a diary of some sort. Because I think my photography is a kind of a diary.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very
I think
interesting.
it's true, yes.
Yeah. And I was wondering, what's your personal definition of street photography?
That it's real, that it's not set up.
Is it always real?
Yeah.
Would you say?
Well, if it's not set up, it's real.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. And what does the street attract you to? What is from
I
the
don't
street
know.
that attracts you?
It's the outside studio. It's just where you take photographs. Well, it's not so much the street. It's outside of your front door, isn't it? It's in public spaces. It's outside, you know.
Fair enough.
Cool, cool. What would you call your style?
Uh, kind of rooted in traditional street photography, but also I think I wear two hats. There's the kind of conventional street photographer, and this other abstract thing, which it's a different kind of photography. Maybe I'm a frustrated painter, or I don't know, but there's definitely an abstract. I mean, for me, the abstract photography is an escape from doing all the conventional stuff. I feel this need to escape. So sometimes I don't want it in focus. I change the shutter speed and go off in a different world. It's just seems a very natural way for me to go. So the abstract is probably about 25% of my photography, maybe. It's an escape.
Yeah. No, I really love your the abstract kind of photography that I've seen in your body of work. And starting from here, what do you think makes a perfect shot? So what's your approach when you want a perfect shot?
I don't know. I think getting the perfect shot or the great shot or the very good shot, I think the photographs are out there. You just have to dig them up. I think that's how I look at it. They're there. And
Not
someday,
everybody sees it, right? So what do you see it?
but I just think I go looking for my photographs, and sometimes they're there. I know they're there.
You know they're there.
Yeah, they don't come along that often, I guess. It's a lot of it's to do with me. It's what's inside my head. Whether my photography has changed. Probably I've probably paced myself a lot more now. I used to go out all the time, every day. I don't now. It comes in sort of. I have kind of periods, intense activity, and then I stop. It's much more sporadic now. I always have the feeling that when I do it, I want to do it properly. I've got to be really up for it, and mostly I'm up for it when I travel. The travel thing is that I go somewhere and I'm really switched on. I was in Istanbul last year and Italy and the US, and I go to New York or something and I'm completely switched on. So I get inspired by other places.
So you would say it's more about the different places and the different vibes and the people that are
Yeah, the
there
energy I do, it's just somewhere different. I mean,
than London, I
yes,
guess.
yes. I might have a slight problem with London, that I've done London, as it
Too
were,
much.
and I find it difficult to motivate myself to do it. But when I go somewhere else, it's different.
Yeah, it must feel fresher to some
Yeah, I mean,
extent.
some people would say that you should be able to do it wherever you are. Uh, there's some truth in that, but I remember in lockdown when I couldn't go anywhere like everyone. I live in the countryside, and I ended up in the end photographing horses. So I had to find some channel of creativity, I guess. But generally, it's cities for me.
Yeah, no, that must have been a curious experience given how much you travel and how many different places you've been in. It's also very interesting that you used percentage earlier. You said that abstraction is like 25% of your
Yeah, yeah. I
photography.
mean, yeah, maybe 20%. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I was curious, in a percentage, how much would you say that planning and spontaneity weigh on your creative process on during your shootings?
There's no planning really. It's just when the need comes, you know. Uh, yeah, there's no planning. I don't. I just have to be in the right mindset to do it. When the hunger comes, I guess.
So it's more of a gut feeling.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I mean, I go for long periods of not taking photographs. I've hardly taken any photographs this year,
Yeah.
for instance. But I will start, and when I start, I want to do it properly. I'll tell you something. I dream about taking photographs sometimes. Very strange thing.
Interesting.
And in my dreams, I'm really, really trying, and I'm seeing amazing things. You know, I'm flying, and then the common dream is that my camera jams, and I keep pushing the shutter speed, and it won't work. And it's a kind of a frustration. Very strange. Yeah, I don't know what the meaning of that is. That the camera won't work. It jams, and I don't know what it means. But it's something that rises up in me every now and again. Maybe subconsciously I'm telling myself, yeah, 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 you need to do it.
Yeah, know that. Okay. Another thing I would like to ask you is that how do you know you've taken a shot that satisfies you?
Uh, would generally you have an idea when you're taking it. Uh, you kind of know most of the time, but you also it's looking later, and you can be surprised. Something you might have thought one shot, oh, that's the one that was really good. And then when you look at it, you think, oh no, it's not so good. And there might be something else that you took, and that becomes a slight surprise. Yeah, but you generally know when you're doing it most of the time.
Interesting.
I've not been able to go back through my archive, if you can call it that, and find many hidden gems.
Uh,
I tend to know at the time. Yeah.
yeah. So like instinct is very like crucial in your process, in your work. So I was also wondering, since instinct is such a big part of your process, do you have any strict rules you follow? And among the rules you follow, is there a rule that you like to break in order to be free in your approach, in your vision?
Only the breaking the rule is just to suddenly go into this abstract world and take blurry photographs. That's somewhere else to go. Yeah. That's all I can say on that, I think, probably.
Because you're very atypical as well as a street photographer, I would say. It's
Yes,
not the
yes.
classic.
I kind of got my signature style
Yeah, exactly.
early on.
That's what I want to
With
go. I want, could you
with
elaborate on
my
that?
photography, there was a signature style, and I've kind of abandoned it to an extent when I switched to color.
And I want to go into that kind of discussion. Why, again, I want to know a little bit more. When and why did you start switching, and what was the click that made you switch from black and white and color? If you could elaborate on that a little bit more.
A couple of reasons. One, I was so religious about black and white, and I used to go and visit design companies and show my folio to advertising agencies. Then they'd say, "Oh yeah, great, but do you shoot color?" And I say, "No, I don't shoot color." And then I think when digital cameras came in like, well, I don't know, 2003. I mean, that's when digital photography kind of came into my life, and
Yeah.
I got pushed to a certain extent because of digital cameras to shoot color, and I think I was surrounded by other photographers. I think it's typical of a certain generation to have started off with black and white, and
Okay.
then supposedly progress to cut. Where maybe now it's the other way around for a lot of people starting now. I find that interesting. So another thing was I was bored with my black and white.
Yeah.
I needed something else.
Something different. I guess right now instead it's a way of going back to something that wasn't there anymore. You know, as you were saying, you transitioned from black and white to colors because colors came. I thought also another reason could be for a much cheaper way of doing photography as well compared to analog.
Yeah, of course it is. It's easier. Yeah.
And now instead there is the generation that actually going back to the good old days, if we may
Yeah.
call
I
them
mean,
like
they
that.
see it as sort of authentic or something. It's still that black and white tradition is still there.
It is still there, and it really waits on different and new photographer of new generations. I want to go a little bit more into your signature style as well. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, how do you see luck as a street photographer? And do you think luck is important? Do you think you place yourself in the perfect moment? How does luck influence a photographer's vision or approach?
Well, I think you go looking for the luck. I think, but you have to have some belief that it's there, and you know it when you see it.
You know it when you see it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean the luck is out there. It's like I say, you dig these images up, and sometimes it doesn't happen, and you don't know why it's not happened, but it's just not going to happen that day. But the luck is there.
There for you to take it.
Yeah, and I think it's like a hunter, isn't it? It's like the cheetah, something on the Serengeti. They're walking slowly around, and they suddenly see something in the distance, and they're there.
It's there. You just need to grab
Yeah,
it.
yeah. It happens very quickly. You know, you have to be quick, and you know this is the moment, and you jump in.
So what advice would you give to someone just starting out in these terms? Like, because you're saying such very interesting and powerful things as well that who's starting out just now would definitely appreciate. How would you position your talk to someone that is starting now?
I think you've got to look up to photographers, and I think you must not be obsessed with your own photography. You should be obsessed with the work of the great photographers and have that standard in your head. And I would extend that to having photo books. I would be suspicious of anyone who has only 4 photo books. I mean, that sounds a bit harsh, but I think you have to have some reference points, inspiration. It's all about inspiration.
when you have strong inspiration, also trying to replicate those inspirations, something that could definitely
Yeah, I
help
mean,
you
there is
grow.
a thing of replicating, and I think you can take it too far. You can become a clone. There's lots of clone soul lighter photographers out there. I think
But do you think cloning is something to this kind of photographer, which are very high profile photographers? Cloning, it's something very, very hard to come close. Like Soul Later, I think nobody will ever come close to Soul Later in
well,
that
they
sense.
do in a way because of all the technology. You can coat images to that soul lighter look, whatever it is. There's some app, isn't there, to make them soul lighterish, as if they're from the 1950s.
Okay.
There is a
Okay.
slight contradiction about being inspired and copying other photographers, but you do that to a certain extent, and then you let it go, I suppose. And that's really when you find your own style,
Interesting.
and that's a tricky one to get.
Hmm. Okay. I have just one question. I'll leave the floor to Mario because I got drifted a little bit more in what you were saying.
No.
So I just wanted to know a little bit more. You keep mentioning this learning curve that you've been having over the years as well, and how you've been not moving styles, but developing and evolving into different kind of styles.
Yeah.
You've been transitioning, trying out new approaches, different things. How do you think your audience, the people that were looking up to you, have received this?
I mean, when I first started doing the abstract photographs, there's an element of them being a little bit cliche, like library photographs, and I think I grew with confidence because I got reactions from other people that also like the abstract photographs.
Okay.
And it took me a little while to kind of gain confidence in that respect. And then I realized that, this is legitimate. This is a good strand of my photography. So if you want to use the word audience, then I did get some feedback on the abstract images. People like them.
So you think that the people's opinion, in a way, pushed you to go
Yeah,
further
I
with
think,
this?
I mean,
That was my
we live
question.
in a world now, don't we, where social media, where opinion matters, feedback matters, and I'm vulnerable to it like a lot of people. I find Instagram interesting that I post things there sometimes, and I think, oh, this will really, hit, and it gets it bombs, and I thought, oh, I understand.
I would like to stay on this topic actually, interaction, feedback, inspiration, because I was very intrigued by all the things you said about inspiration, copying, and cloning. You mentioned Cartier-Bresson as one of your main inspiration, one of your first
Early, yeah.
inspiration. Yeah. And what other photographers or other artists that come to mind when you think of inspiration today?
Today, well, I'll take you back a bit. Early inspirations, like I said, were Cartier-Bresson and Elliot Erwitt, but there was another photographer, Mario Giacomelli,
Italian.
who
Yeah.
I'm sure you know. I became aware of him quite early on, and he was a big inspiration for me. I found him very interesting. I really related to what he did. He never traveled anywhere. He just stayed put more or less in one place. But now for inspiration, it's kind of, it's so wide. It's hard to really pin it down.
It's actually very interesting because you're big on traveling, basically.
Well,
And
I travel a reasonable amount. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting to have you talk about a photographer who hasn't moved a whole lot like you did. So, is there any other photographer with a different style than yours that you would consider an inspiration today?
Would I give you an example of Alex Webb and his wife, Alex and Rebecca?
Rebecca.
They're both good photographers. but in some ways, I prefer Rebecca's work. It's different. It's quieter. It's a bit more poetic, abstract. So I like Rinko Kawachi. I know not all photographs with people in. That this is another aspect. Street photography doesn't need people. So yeah, I think it's like music. There's lots of different things to appreciate.
Absolutely. And is there any other artistic language or art form that you have borrowed from? Because whenever I see your most abstract pieces, I think of Magritte. I think of abstract painters. So, is there any other art form that inspired you? Cinema, music,
Uh,
fine art.
I suppose cinema to a certain extent, but I think my main inspiration is music. I like to. People say, "Who's your favorite photographer?" And I would say Neil Young, which is a kind of
Wow.
a sort of. I mean, it's a sort of silly thing to say, but I like the idea of somebody who just keeps doing it and never goes out of fashion. And even though he's like 70 or 75 or whatever, he's still doing it. I mean, I admire songwriters. Music is a big thing for me.
Who's
So
your
yeah.
Yeah, who's your favorite composer or singer?
Well, I mean, I've got all my CDs here. I've
Oh,
Rolling Stones, Joni Mitchell. My big thing is the Beatles. I'm a kind of closet.
I'm thinking, and I'm like chewing on all the concepts that are coming out of this interview. And I was also thinking, there's lots of advice a photographer gets uh, when they're starting out, but also during their career by, interacting with other photographers. And I wanted to know the best advice that you received and the worst advice you've ever received in photography.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know either of those. No, I can't. I don't know the answer to that one.
You never receive a good advice.
Oh no.
No, I don't
That's
know.
what it is.
I don't know what. I don't know what. Some good things must have been said to me. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, there's
And
another thing I should mention
okay.
is that I've become a writer on photography,
Uh,
and talking about steep learning curves, I kind of hit another steep learning curve through the writing, and it made me reassess and look again at work, and it reminded me. I did a book called Street Photography,
Yeah.
A History in 100 Iconic Images, and that was a real joy to do because it connected me again with the people who I really admired, and it was a reminder to keep looking up, the best, and it made me sort of reassess my standards,
yeah.
uh, and I think I've got better as a photographer. I think
Through your writing or
I a bit of both. It's the process, the kind of the standard has gone up. I want I dismiss a lot of stuff that I take. It's not good enough. So, I mean, if you're talking about advice to people starting street photography, is the number one rule is you must be constantly frustrated
huh,
and never completely happy with what you're doing.
there.
Yeah.
Why
And
so?
I haven't lost that.
And what do you think is that?
I don't know. I sometimes photographs I've taken and look at them and I think, my God, these are awful. You know, how have I achieved this? Yeah, what's happened.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. And since you've been talking about iconic images, iconic shots, what makes a picture, a shot, truly iconic for you?
Well, it could be the context in which it exists. I mean, some photographs become iconic because of what they're associated with. I mean, you could have a photograph on an album cover, and it becomes iconic, doesn't it? Because it's
It does.
seen by so many people. What becomes iconic outside of the context, I don't know. It's kind of it has some common thing that resonates with people, and I don't think you can always describe that. I don't know. Can you take an iconic photograph and know you've taken an iconic photograph? I mean, it's history that decides that, isn't it? I don't know.
That's okay.
And you also talked about the purpose of your art, of your photography. Would you elaborate a little bit more on on the purpose of your art, of your photography, your raison d'être, basically?
Well, I think you've got to do something, haven't you? Uh, it's what I do, and it's what lots of other people do, and you mustn't underestimate that. It's what I've seen in my lifetime. It's what I'm looking at, what I'm thinking about, and it is a kind of diary, visual diary. Maybe how it's received by other people. I don't know the purpose bit. You're starting to talk about things like ambition here, aren't you? And sort of, I suppose there's a certain desire to make your mark. But that's something you can't necessarily control. I mean, who knows? Vivian Maier. I mean, yeah, but she didn't know it in her lifetime, did she?
Until she got
Yeah.
discovered. Yeah.
And who do you become when you have a camera in your hands?
Who did I become?
Yeah, who do you become each time you shoot? Do you feel like you're becoming a different person every time you shoot, or do you feel you're becoming a different version of yourself, but like always you get a familiar sensation even if you're shooting widely different things?
Maybe it's like putting on an item of clothing. You put on a hat, and that's what you're doing. I don't really think about it. I mean, I do have this thing where, talking about street photography, where you become a bit detached from everything that's around you, and you kind of float a bit, and you're observing. I mean, I've always thought that I'm most of the time half invisible. So there is this kind of zone that you try and aim for. So it's like you're putting on a hat. The camera is the hat, and you're suddenly doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a literal hat that you like wearing when
No,
like
no,
it's
no.
sunny
I
out?
don't. No, I have a couple of hats. Maybe that's acts as a slight disguise. Maybe you can
Okay.
pull I've got a baseball hat. You pull the peak down and you become even more anonymous. People can't really see you so much. Uh,
So you prefer to have a low profile when you shoot,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because
My natural persona is I'm not a big gregarious person. I don't interact with people when I'm photographing them.
you prefer to stay a little bit
Yeah,
further
yeah.
away from
I'm
them.
kind of half invisible.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I don't go up to people and sort of say, can I take your photograph?
So
That
you
I find
never had to
hard.
deal with someone that was annoyed by you taking photograph, or did that happen to you?
It's happened a few times, but not very often.
Okay.
I mean, I've been caught maybe 3 times. Yeah, maybe
Hmm,
4.
maybe 4.
I just give off this persona. I don't. This is a huge thing for a lot of people doing
Yeah.
streams. They're so conscious about being seen, and if you've got that problem, you're never going to be able to do it. And I don't have that problem if you're trying to photograph people.
Yeah.
Is there a specific shot that changed the game for you? A specific shot you've taken where you felt like you were getting somewhere, even if you weren't completely happy with it, as you mentioned.
There is one photograph I took. Uh, I think I took it in about 2016, 2017, and I was quite surprised by it. And it was a kind of I don't want to make it sound too dramatic, but it was a kind of eureka moment. I thought, this is interesting. It was the first time that I recognized that I'd photographed nothing, in that the subject was, you wouldn't know what the photograph was of. You wouldn't have a clue. So you're presented with this photograph and you interpret it through your imagination. And I think the photograph is more powerful because it becomes fiction as opposed to fact. And I found that very interesting, that you could take a photograph and it would not be, the context would be removed completely. And I recognized that, and I've tried to do it a few other times. I'm very interested in this, the narrative of photographs, where you look at it and you're not just looking at something that's obvious. You have to apply your imagination and you have to interpret it yourself. And this photograph is in the one of the ones for the book, I think. Yeah, it is.
Yes.
And I called it Nothing. It's
What is it?
well, it's in a market, antiques market, and there's a
Ah.
awning, and there's a lamp behind the material, but it looks like the Industrial Revolution. I like to think that the photograph was taken before photography was invented.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just find that very interesting, that it can be, the photograph can be powerful in a different way. So that was a interesting moment.
Absolutely. So, since we're talking about fiction and you're a writer, you have a particular way of you have a particular storytelling that you follow with your shots. So, is photography more of a storytelling tool or an exploration of reality, according to you?
I think a bit of both, isn't it? It's what you see in the photograph. You know, you might look at it and think, what's going on? I think if photographs can have that element of surprise. You know, you look at it and think, wow, this is strange. One of my themes of my photograph is oddness. You know, odd things happening. Where you keep looking at the photograph and you can't quite figure out what the hell's happening.
Yeah, so there's so many layers. Yeah, just like a story.
Yeah.
I really like complex storytelling in film and literature. So I also love it in photography. So I think I'm starting to relate to what you're saying. It's very yeah,
Well,
it's very
this relates to this book that I've done, and I didn't know how to present my photographs, and I've given all these talks at camera clubs and stuff,
Yes.
where I've
Yeah.
given this commentary on the photographs. And Talk on the Street is literally that. It's just my interpretation of these photographs. So it's a bit of an
Exactly.
unusual book.
Because apart from being a great photographer, you're also a great writer. Like I've had the pleasure to read quite a lot of your introductions. And I wanted to ask you, how do you combine both crafts and how do you think both can influence each other?
It's only recently that I would consider myself a writer. I'm not. I feel a bit of a fraud as a writer. I mean, sometimes I've been asked to write something, an introduction or something, and I think, well, why aren't they asking me to do a book of my photographs? It's sort of the two. What do you want, the writing or the photography? I'm a reluctant to admit that I'm a writer. I'm not completely comfortable with it. I find it easier to say that I'm a photographer who's done a bit of writing.
And do you think writing is a way of, I don't know, explaining your photograph? What is it? What does writing give you? What does it give it to you in terms of connection to your photography?
Well, it's not just my photography. I mean, most of the writing I do is on other people's photographs.
Yes.
And I often feel more comfortable doing that.
Comment on others, you mean?
Yeah. I kind of enjoy that more in a way. But it's an extension of the photography. It's just it's an extension, understanding and diving into the photograph. But it's also, I mean, it's not just writing about other people's photographs. It's writing about other people's lives, and I think photographers have interesting lives. I mean, that's another aspect of it. So they're kind of role models.
The kind of role models, you said.
Yeah. I think, that's another aspect of the inspiration, isn't it? It's not just the photographs they took, but it's the lives they lived. I mean, we're, talking about the great photographers. I mean, they lived amazing lives, didn't they? They recorded history and witnessed all these things and went everywhere and stuff,
I want to dive a little bit deeper into your writing. And as I was saying before, I read your introduction, especially the one about your photography manual. And one thing that really stood out for both of us in that sense is the presence of women, which is very, very limited, as you also mentioned in your introduction.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to ask you is, why do you think is that limited? Why do you think women are not included in photography?
Well, you have to divide it. You have to split it. We can talk about now, which is, let's say, the last 10 years, and women photographers, women street photographers are absolutely there. It's 50-50, some of the best around. But if you go back into the history, you can't rewrite history. And that's a bit of a thorny subject, isn't it? And I mean, I did the book 100 Iconic Images, and I tried really hard to up the female content. I mean, I really went looking for it, but I found it hard. And I think of the 100, I think maybe 20 were women. So that's history. So it's a very tricky subject.
If I may add,
Exactly.
like one thing, on this topic, what's a way that veteran photographers such as yourself can uplift your women colleagues so that everyone shines equally? Because a misogynistic eye is not always intentional, so there's lots of internalized prejudice that one doesn't even notice. So what's a way to be really aware of what you're looking at, of what you're dealing with, and how can you best support your colleagues?
Well, I don't think they need any help now. They're pretty powerful.
Are they?
I don't see any problem.
Okay. No.
I mean, the thing is, the question is, who cares whether the photograph is taken by a man or a woman?
Yes, nobody cares
I mean,
as far as it
you know,
goes.
you know the book. What's it called? Was it Great Women Street Photographers? Do you know the one? And there's 100. I think there's 100 in. I was involved with that book at the beginning.
Oh.
But they wanted a female writer to do it, basically. I think there's 100 photographs in that, and I think if you went through it, you wouldn't know whether the photographer... I mean, you might know the name, you might recognize the image, but you wouldn't know whether the photographer was male or female.
Hmm.
So then you have to come back to this question: is there a female eye? And you could say, well, maybe females take more pictures of family and stuff, but I don't think you can tell much difference. Like Melissa O'Shaughnessy, to me, I know who she is.
Of
And I've
course.
met her a few times, but her images to me look as if they're taken by a man. Really, if you wanted to kind of really look at them, I mean,
Okay.
I can't
Okay.
tell the gender from looking at her photographs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think Marilu's question was more like, what can we do to try to have the same equal access? Because I've been talking to different female photographers, and one problem they always point out is the same having the same access, which is the great issue behind gender equality. To have the same access to sources, resource access. Yes.
Yeah.
I do know there's a shift in the publishing world where they're much more proactive for female photographers. I tell you something, I'd like to do a book about football, pictures of the history of football, great football pictures. I know if I go to a publisher with that idea, they say, great, but we want female footballers in it. Yes, in
Token.
I mean that then becomes a debate, doesn't it? Women are doing pretty good. I mean, they banded together, haven't they? They are doing pretty good.
I guess we can move on a little bit more.
We could go into something a little bit more technical, and I want to know something completely different. And I wanted to ask you, what's your camera setup? Like,
well, at the moment, for the last 10 years, I've used the Fuji X100T.
okay. And what's something you always carry in your bag, your camera bag? Is there?
Oh, well, there's just camera. There's just nothing else. One camera with a fixed lens. Nothing else.
Less is more.
No, it's one. That's it. One camera, one lens. The lens is fixed, so I can't. Yeah, it's very
Change
simple.
them.
Yeah.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more also about your post-production. How do you edit your photos? Do you try to keep them as raw as possible, or what kind of level of post-production do you do in your photographs?
Not a great deal. I use Photoshop. I often use auto contrast just to get the contrast right. With the abstract images, I do sometimes increase the saturation slightly. Okay. But I think I keep it to pretty minimal. I don't like the pictures to look kind of absurd. So it's really the contrast and the lightness, darkness that I do. It doesn't take me long to auto contrast. It takes me 20 seconds to do a photograph.
It's something that a lot of photographers do.
I know. I don't crop, and I don't.
Yeah, that would have been my second question.
No. This is another thing I'm pretty big on. I don't crop.
You try to keep it as real as possible.
Absolutely, yeah. When I do workshops, I say to people, I have a butcher's knife. I says, anybody who crops, they put their fingers on the table, and I crop their fingers off.
That's fair. That's interesting.
You should never crop. Unless you really, really know what you're doing.
I mean, there are some photographers in history that have been
Well, there was one, Eugene Smith, who used to
crop,
but he kept the ratio. So I mean, there's a few of his images that are iconic, and it's surprising to learn that it's only 20% of the whole frame. I mean, Elliot Erwitt cropped some of his well-known images, but it's the ratio. You wouldn't know that it was cropped.
True. I want to still remain on the topic of technicalities and approach. You often use to photograph dirty windows, different textures. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Why do you do it, and how?
Well, it's just. I think it's like a portal, isn't it? It's like a hidden thing. You enter a different world when you take reflections.
Okay.
It's back to this escape thing again. You're trying to escape You don't want the street too literal. You want to make it more interesting or different. So that's when you reflections and taking photographs through textures. You're trying to change. You're trying to manipulate reality more.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like textures and layers and things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. It's very interesting. So one golden rule you have is not cropping,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but that's for sure. You always you seem to break composition rules a little bit to get more interesting shots. And could you tell us if you do that intentionally, or is it sometimes just the way you photograph things? So does it just happen, or do you break these rules
I don't
intentionally?
break the rules, but I look for different vantage points. I quite like looking down on scenes. I'm not sure that I'm breaking rules. Sort of, it's they're still fairly straightforward. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the rules are.
Yeah,
I
that's
used to
also
know what the rules are, but
it's like learning a language. Like you can speak it fluently, like a native person, and not know, not be able to enunciate the actual grammar rules.
Fair.
I mean, if you'd ask an Italian native speaker
yeah,
to tell you,
you could say it's like you know you're a musician or something, but you can't read music.
yeah, that's also that. And also still staying on the topic of rules and tricks and textures and the like. Does motion blur, which is another one of the trademarks, fall into the same category as textures when it comes to your stylistic choices?
Yeah, I think it does. It all comes under the heading of like abstract, doesn't it? I mean, abstract is the word I kind of keep coming back to.
Is there a particular project, especially from your early days, that you remember fondly because maybe it made you say, "Okay, this is where it gets serious."
I don't know about project. I've never really pursued projects that much. Uh, I mean, I've identified threads and themes by looking through my photographs. Definitely. Uh, I don't know. I mean, there's another aspect to my photography, the black and white photography, which is the black and white photography is a surprise to me in many ways because when I took them in the 1990s, I was in the present and I had no inkling of the future. So I was just taking photographs then. And I've become very interested in this aspect of photographs often work when you have time added. So you take a photograph in 1992 and you add 30 years, it becomes incredibly interesting because that world has kind of faded, disappeared, but you're not aware of that at the time. During the 1990s, I took lots of photographs of the elderly for some reason. I thought they were interesting because the way they dressed, they were slightly out of place maybe. And of course, they've all gone, so I photographed a lot of women with headscarves in London. And women of a certain age during the 1990s used to wear a headscarf, but now they don't. And I took a few of these photos. I wish I'd have taken more because it would have been a really good, kind of project. So I'm talking about my black and white photographs here, but obviously this book is color. So it's a different thing. It's in the past. But I would like to do a book on my black and white photographs, but that's a separate thing, I think.
Yeah. So, would you be able to identify one work that is closest to your heart? So something that you're very fond of. Even the manuals, even all the projects you've done through the years. Is there one that that you're particularly fond?
I don't think the street photographer's manual is so great. It could have been a lot better, but the iconic one was the one. I think I kind of rose to the occasion. I think because of the photographs in it, I had an obligation to kind of do it properly. Regarding my photograph, I don't know. There's probably a few. I will always come back to the photograph of the little girls in red.
I wanted to talk about Talk on the Street, our book that we're doing together as well. And the first thing I want to ask you is that the book includes different locations. It goes from Prague to Los Angeles. It travels a little bit the world in that sense, also showcasing your photography through different years. Would you like to share a little bit of one of your favorite places you've visited and you've shot it as well, of one of the photographs that is in the book?
Well, the photographs are London, but I'm not so conscious of London because it's kind of, I live close to London, so I don't think of that as quite so unique. But the travel experiences, I've been to Prague several times, and I tend to switch on when I'm there. So I've built up a small body of work of Prague. There's a few in there that I'm quite pleased with.
So would you say Prague is the city you're most emotionally
not
attracted
necessarily,
to?
not necessarily. I don't know that I have a favorite city. Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily looking to capture cities, although I do fall into the trap slightly of become a bit of a tourist. I mean, that's hard to kind of avoid sometimes. I mean, I'd love to go to Cuba. I've not, locations that I'm not sure about. I still go looking for my photographs.
There's one thing that I would like to add, also staying on the topic of Talk on the Street. And is there something you found that all the places you've been to have in common, despite the aesthetic and cultural differences? Is there one element that all these cities have that you found?
Well, I suppose you'd have to say the people, wouldn't you? The human behaviour is the same. It's the backdrop that changes, the buildings, but it's still people, moving around in their daily lives. It's still the absurd, the poignant moments. So there's no change there, I don't think. But the backdrop is interesting.
Absolutely.
I'm very interested in the backdrops, the buildings. So that, I mean, the light is the same everywhere, isn't it? I guess.
Still to stay on topic on Talk on the Street, I was absolutely thrilled when you shared the dreams that you had about photography, like the literal dreams. Yeah. And if I may, I wanted to ask a bit more about your relationship with dreams. And is there, a way for you to interpret them? Do you remember them? Do you remember them a lot? And do they make their way into your photography, so to speak?
I wish they did. I wish I could download the images I've taken while I've been dreaming. That would be good.
That would be very cool.
Yeah, for sure. No, something very unexpected. That was amazing.
Maybe in 50 years from now, AI will do something like this.
Yeah. There is a movie about this. There are several movies about this.
Yeah.
It's true. I wanted to ask you, David, to kind of close this part of the interview. What's your opinion on the future of photography? How do you see street photography?
Well, it's like... it continues, it's thriving, etc. It's still vibrant, but I'm aware of this creeping AI thing happening. And Am I disturbed by it? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I look at, you get on Instagram, there's some AI there, and often it's pictures of models. And you look and you think, oh, wow, what a great photograph. And then you look, oh, it's AI. And it's an instant disappointment. You think, oh, why, what's the point?
Yeah.
But AI has not got to street photography yet. I don't think it can't do multiple things. It can create a picture of a person, one person, and it can look very real. But I don't know all the technicalities and stuff, but I don't think AI has got to street photography yet. If it does, then we're in trouble.
Absolutely.
Yes.
What's one thing you haven't shot that you dream of shooting?
It would just have to be cities that I've not been to, I think.
And is there, apart from Cuba, is there other places?
Oh, I think I'd love to go to Japan. I think the list is almost endless. Yeah, I think there's always got to be somewhere new and exciting,
Explore.
Yeah. I don't know until I get there, I guess. A few places in Italy, yeah. Last year I went to San Remo, Pisa.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Very, very cool. Do you have any other questions? Because otherwise,
we can.
move on.
I think we can go with the photos.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
the help of Marco, of course, the editor of Eyeshot, we have selected a few of them. Let me know if
Yeah.
you can see the screen, first of all.
Oh, yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So we want to start off with this one. This really connects to the double, to this way that you have of approaching photography with different texture, different broken glass, dirty glass. Could you say something about this, Vishu? Could you?
This is a double exposure,
Okay, perfect.
which
And could you elaborate on that?
I thinking of different techniques and stuff, and it was something I'd never tried, and I just became very intrigued with the potential of double exposures. And it's not necessarily easy, but you have to do it in two parts, obviously. And with a digital camera, you fix your first photograph, which is kind of the background or the texture. So the first photograph is, you take that and you save it in the camera. So the first photograph is very important. That sort of sets the tone, if you like. So it's a broken window, which is an interesting thing on its own. Then you take that, then you move around, what can I find to put in the frame? And I think this is a mother and son, and it seemed to fit. So it's taking two photographs, it's different, and you have to consider each exposure very carefully. Otherwise, it looks nothing.
So the choice of the subjects and the choice of the broken glass was just random, or did you want it to express
No,
something?
I go looking for the first photograph, the background, the canvas, whatever you want to call it. It could be the background. The first exposure is really the background. It could be a brick wall or just a color. It's something that's not too intrusive.
Okay.
And like glass is a good one, especially if it's broken. Then you have to find what's going to go in there. I guess you could say it's like taking a window for a walk.
Oh, a window for a walk.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'll move to the next one, which I'm also very fond of. This is one of your, I guess, spot on abstraction approach to photography. Could you elaborate on that? What do you see in this picture? Can you explain your also thought process? How did it go about? How did you have this eye for this particular photo?
Well, I just see unusual things, and it's basically someone was cleaning the street in London with foam, and they were kind of sweeping it away, and it had fallen into the gutter. All this foam, I think you'd call it foam, and it just left this interesting shape. And this is what I mean by imagination, because suddenly we're looking at something else. we're looking at an alien. That's Ridley Scott. This is what we've got here. This is an alien in the gutter. That's what it is. That's what it is. It's an alien.
It is an alien.
Yeah. Maybe it's the wrong color. Uh,
Thought at first impression when I saw it, it looked kind of like a hug as well. Like I feel like a person hugging someone else. I
yeah,
don't know. I see the arm. I see the
like a dog
hand.
or something. Yeah, there does seem to be a hand going across it.
But I guess that's the power of photography.
Yeah,
as well,
I mean,
right?
this seeing unusual things in usual things, isn't it? It's unexpected.
Yeah, it is. Cool. Let's move on. This one, you have this particular way of approaching photography as well with a lot of motion. And this is not the only photograph in the book, but this one really stood out, especially for the color palette. Could you tell me a little bit more about this?
Well, this is Extinction Rebellion in London. I don't know if you know them.
Yes.
And they have
The
part of their,
activist.
yeah, of course. And part of their group is to dress up as Grim Reapers in red and green. And they parade through London. And for me, this is a gift. I mean, it's a theatrical thing. And I just follow them or walk beside them. I bring the shutter speed down to about 1/8 of a second. I shake the camera slightly. I'm looking for that right moment. And there is an element of this of where the imagination comes in again. But to me, they look medieval.
Yes, absolutely. I would have never thought they were Extinction Rebel activist group.
So I'm removing the context a little bit. I mean, photographing Extinction Rebellion or process in general is not really that interesting. But this particular aspect of Extinction Rebellion is wonderful. They want to be photographed as well. So, I mean, you know.
To spread the word.
Yeah. And they kind of fade into the distance. The photograph goes to a point.
Very interesting.
I thought these were cardinals, like at the first glance, right?
Yeah, the kind of religious sense.
Yes, it could be religious. Yes, yeah. I mean, I like these sort of uniform shots. People wearing uniforms. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that really is part of your photography as well.
Together, yeah.
Absolutely. This photo, which is one of the best photos you have, from my opinion as well. Like I really, really like the face kind of dripping down. But where was this shot? How did you find it? Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
It's in Hanoi in Vietnam.
Ah.
And it's a mural on a wall. And the wall is crumbling. And it seemed at the time a very easy photograph to take. But I felt at the same time it was quite powerful. I mean, there had to be some context in the photograph, I think. If I'd photographed just the woman's face on the wall, it wouldn't be so interesting. So you got that bit on the left that adds a bit of context. And the fact that it's decaying and crumbling is, I mean, I imagine this wall is now completely gone.
Yeah.
It's from 2020 or something. And I don't know what it is. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting, and it also brought out aspects of the Vietnam War to me, right? Because it's got this kind of stencil numbers on it, like a GI name tag. So that sent the thing off in a different direction. Very easy photograph to take, but interesting how it evokes things.
This one.
This is on the top of a London bus.
Yeah.
I'm going home, but I've not quite stopped taking photographs. And it's nighttime. It's raining outside. There's condensation on the window. And I'm looking at the red traffic lights, the tail lights, and I just put my hand there, my handprint as a kind of little window. So I'm kind of interacting, setting it up a little bit. But again, interesting. It's about colours, the red, and the fingerprint. I just a pleasing image, my kind of photograph.
Yeah, I can see it. I will move on to the next one. Yes. This
This is
one.
outside the British Museum in London.
And this is Rome, right? I think I recognize Rome at the back.
Yeah. But there must have been some exhibition on at the British Museum in connection with Rome, I guess. I don't know. And this guy was just taking the poster down, and it's almost like he's removing himself from the picture, and he's going to disappear.
With the picture at the back.
Yeah.
And this one.
Well, it's 2008 in London, the theatre area in London. I'm just wandering around, and this coach stops outside of a theatre, and all these little girls get off dressed in red like that. And I'm just hanging around a bit, looking, and they walked round to the back of the theatre where they queued up to go in. And I stood across the road from them, and I was there for about 2 minutes and just took a series of photographs.
And then this came out.
Kind of knowing what I was doing, but and I got lucky that, because I think there's 9 people in this, or 10 or whatever, and to get every face is doing exactly the right thing is kind of miraculous.
It is.
And I always think that day, the one I'd got of photography was looking down on me. I got very lucky.
Yeah.
The thing is, it was a friendly moment. There was no, because photographing children, it can be quite tricky, but this was quite a friendly encounter. I think the teacher was with them, and I smiled, and then I didn't overstay my welcome, though. 2 minutes, and that was it.
That was, I guess, a very lucky shot there. I think we've talked quite a lot as well. So David, again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, thank you for
to talk with
I
us.
wasn't quite. I didn't expect this kind of level of
Interview.
Yeah.
Oh well, I guess we can take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
Can we? We hope you had fun. We really, really enjoyed ourselves. So again, thank you for your time. And we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you for your time and for all the insights you've given us. It's been a journey, and
For sure.
I think it's been a great journey for us.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, very
Thank you,
interesting
David. Thank
things.
you.
I wouldn't normally surprise.
Do this.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
We're glad you're surprised. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Bye, David.
Right.
Have a great day. Have a great day.
Okay.
Bye.